Have you ever felt like life happens to you rather than for you? Like you're caught in a chaotic game where everyone knows the rules except you? What if I told you that reality isn't random at all? It operates according to precise, unchanging cosmic laws that most people completely ignore. Today, we're diving deep into the cosmic blueprint, understanding the universal laws, an illuminating exploration of the 7 Hermetic principles that silently govern every aspect of your existence. Understanding these laws isn't just philosophical. It's the difference between being swept along by life's currents and becoming the conscious architect of your own reality. Subscribe now and join me on this journey of revelation that transforms how you perceive and interact with the universe. The Cosmic Blueprint, Understanding the Universal Laws. Introduction: the hidden architecture of reality. In a universe that often appears chaotic and unpredictable, most individuals navigate their lives believing they are subject to random circumstances beyond their control. This perception couldn't be further from the truth. What if I told you that beneath the seeming randomness of existence lies an elegant, ordered system of universal laws, a cosmic blueprint that governs every aspect of reality? Since ancient times, those who have peered beyond the veil of ordinary perception have discovered these fundamental principles. From the mystery schools of Egypt to the philosophical traditions of Greece, from the wisdom of Eastern sages to the insights of modern metaphysics, a consistent understanding has emerged. The universe operates according to definable, immutable laws. These are not human-made regulations, but rather the very fabric of existence itself, as consistent and reliable as gravity, yet far more profound in their implications. The knowledge you are about to receive has been carefully guarded throughout history, passed down through initiatic traditions and often veiled in symbolic language. Today, we strip away the esoteric trappings to reveal the practical core of these teachings. The 7 Hermetic principles outlined in this book represent the distillation of ancient wisdom, presented here not as abstract philosophy, but as practical tools for conscious living. Why is this understanding so crucial? Because ignorance of these laws doesn't exempt you from their effects. Just as jumping from a height will result in a fall whether or not you understand gravity, these universal laws operate in your life regardless of your awareness. The difference lies in your ability to work with them rather than against them. When you align yourself with these principles, you move from being a passive recipient of experience to becoming an active co-creator of your reality. As we explore each principle in turn, mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender, you will begin to recognize their operation in every aspect of your existence. More importantly, you will discover how to consciously align with these laws to transform your life from the inside out. This is not merely information to be intellectually understood, but wisdom to be embodied. The true value of these teachings emerges only through their application. As you integrate this understanding into your daily experience, you will find yourself moving with the currents of the universe rather than against them, accessing levels of harmony, abundance, and purpose that previously seemed beyond reach. Let us begin this journey of illumination together, stepping into the profound simplicity of the cosmic blueprint that underlies all of creation. Chapter 1: The All is Mind, exploring the principle of mentalism. Of all the 7 Hermetic principles that govern our universe, none is more fundamental than the principle of mentalism. This principle, as stated in the ancient Hermetic text known as the Kybalion, declares, "The all is mind, the universe is mental." This simple yet profound statement forms the cornerstone of metaphysical understanding and serves as the foundation upon which all other universal laws rest. What does it mean to say that the all is mind? At its essence, this principle asserts that the entire cosmos, all that is, has been, or ever will be, exists within the mind of what we might call the infinite living mind, the universal mind, or simply the all. Everything that appears as physical matter, energy, psychic phenomena, or spiritual reality is in truth mental creation. The material universe that seems so solid and permanent to our senses is in the final analysis a mental construct, a thought form in the mind of the all. This concept may initially seem abstract or even contrary to your everyday experience. After all, when you strike your hand against a table, the solidity feels undeniably real. Yet modern physics has progressively confirmed what the ancient Hermeticists knew intuitively. Matter, at its most fundamental level, is not solid at all, but rather patterns of energy and information, more akin to thought than to the solid substance it appears to be. Consider the advances in quantum physics, which have demonstrated that the act of observation affects the behavior of subatomic particles. The observer's consciousness, mind, interacts with and influences what was once thought to be purely objective reality. Is this not a scientific echo of the ancient principle that mind underlies all things? The implications of this principle extend far beyond philosophical curiosity. If the universe is mental in nature, then thought is not merely a passive response to reality, but a creative force within it. Your mind, being a part of the universal mind, partakes of its creative power. Your thoughts, beliefs, and mental states are not simply reactions to the world around you, but are active participants in shaping that world. This understanding radically transforms how you perceive your relationship with reality. You are not a helpless spectator in a predetermined universe, but rather a mental creator working with the primary substance of existence, mind. Every thought you entertain, every belief you hold, every mental image you cultivate contributes to the reality you experience. The principle of mentalism also explains the efficacy of many metaphysical practices. Meditation, visualization, affirmation, and prayer all operate on the understanding that consciousness can influence reality at a fundamental level. These are not supernatural interventions, but natural applications of the mental nature of the universe. Consider how this principle manifests in your daily experience. Have you noticed how your perception of a situation dramatically alters your experience of it? Two people can encounter identical circumstances, yet have entirely different experiences based solely on their mental approach. One sees opportunity where another sees obstacle. One finds joy where another finds only frustration. If reality were purely objective and independent of mind, such divergent experiences would be impossible. This is not to suggest that you can instantly manifest any desired reality through thought alone. The principle of mentalism operates in concert with the other 6 principles, which we will explore in subsequent chapters. There are patterns and processes through which mental creation unfolds. Nevertheless, understanding that mind is the foundation of all things places the power of creation squarely in your hands, or more accurately, in your consciousness. How might you begin working with this principle? Start by observing your thoughts with greater awareness. Notice how certain mental patterns consistently precede certain experiences. Pay attention to the beliefs that underlie your perceptions and reactions. Question the assumptions that you have unconsciously accepted as reality. Begin to consciously choose thoughts that align with your desired experience rather than defaulting to habitual patterns. Remember that the principle of mentalism doesn't mean that reality is a mere illusion or that physical experience lacks importance. Rather, it reveals that physical reality is an expression of something more fundamental: mind. The material world is real within its own plane of existence, but it is not the ultimate reality. It is the visible effect of invisible mental causes. As you integrate this understanding, you naturally shift from being a passive recipient of circumstances to becoming a conscious participant in creation. You begin to recognize yourself as what you have always been: a mental creator working with the infinite substance of mind to shape your experience of reality. The principle of mentalism stands as both a profound philosophical truth and a practical tool for conscious living. It reminds us that in a universe that is fundamentally mental in nature, the quality and direction of our thoughts may well be the most important choice we ever make. Chapter 2. As above, so below. Understanding the principle of correspondence. As above, so below. As below, so above. This elegant phrase encapsulates one of the most profound and far-reaching principles in metaphysical understanding, the principle of correspondence. Following naturally from the principle of mentalism, which established that all reality is mental in nature, correspondence reveals the structured relationship between different planes of existence and different aspects of reality. The principle of correspondence states that there is always a correspondence between the laws and phenomena of various planes of being and life. The ancient Hermetic text expresses it thus: "That which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above, to accomplish the miracles of the one thing." This principle serves as a master key that unlocks the door to understanding seemingly disparate aspects of existence by recognizing the patterns that connect them. To grasp the significance of this principle, we must first understand that reality exists on multiple planes or dimensions. The Hermeticists traditionally recognized 7 such planes: the physical, the ethereal, the astral, the mental, the causal, the spiritual, and the divine. While the specific categorization may vary across different traditions, the essential insight remains. Reality is multidimensional, extending far beyond the physical world that our 5 senses perceive. The beauty of the principle of correspondence lies in its revelation that the same patterns repeat across these different planes. The laws that govern the movement of galaxies also govern the motion of atoms. The dynamics that shape societal evolution mirror those that direct individual development. The cycles observed in nature reflect the cycles in human psychology. Nothing exists in isolation. Everything is connected through these corresponding patterns. Consider how this principle manifests in the relationship between the macrocosm, the universe at large, and the microcosm, the individual human being. Ancient wisdom traditions have long recognized that humans are, in essence, miniature versions of the cosmos, containing within themselves all the elements and principles found in the greater universe. "Man, know thyself," advised the oracle at Delphi, "and thou shalt know the universe and the gods." This is not poetic metaphor, but a precise application of the principle of correspondence. Modern science has unwittingly confirmed many aspects of this ancient understanding. The spiral pattern seen in galaxies is mirrored in the structure of seashells and the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower. The network of neurons in the human brain bears a striking resemblance to the cosmic web of galaxies. The mathematical constants that govern natural phenomena appear consistently across vastly different scales of existence. These are not mere coincidences, but expressions of the principle of correspondence. The practical value of this principle cannot be overstated. By understanding the correspondence between different planes of existence, you gain the ability to reason from the known to the unknown. If you comprehend how a principle operates in the physical world, you can, by analogy, understand how it functions on the mental or spiritual planes. This is why parables, allegories, and metaphors have been such powerful teaching tools throughout human history. They leverage the principle of correspondence to convey profound truths through accessible examples. Consider how this principle might apply to your personal development. The process of transforming a thought into physical reality corresponds to the larger creative process of the universe. Your personal cycles of growth and challenge correspond to greater cosmic cycles. The relationship between your conscious and subconscious mind corresponds to universal patterns of manifest and unmanifest reality. By recognizing these correspondences, you gain insight into both yourself and the greater reality of which you are a part. The principle of correspondence also explains why inner work inevitably manifests as outer change. When you alter your consciousness, your above, your physical experience, your below, must eventually align with that change. Conversely, changes in your physical circumstances can be understood as reflections of shifts in consciousness, either your own or the collective consciousness in which you participate. This principle further illuminates the relationship between individual and collective experience. The patterns that shape personal reality correspond to those that shape collective reality. Thus, as you transform your own consciousness, you contribute to the transformation of the whole. This is the metaphysical basis for the observation that personal evolution supports collective evolution. How might you work more consciously with the principle of correspondence? Begin by looking for patterns that repeat across different areas of your life. Notice how the dynamics in your relationships might mirror your relationship with yourself. Observe how your approach to small challenges reflects your approach to larger ones. Pay attention to how changes in your inner state correspond to changes in your outer circumstances. You can also use this principle as a problem-solving tool. When facing a challenge in one area of life, look for corresponding situations that you've successfully navigated in other areas. The strategies that worked in those contexts may, with appropriate adaptation, prove effective in your current circumstance. Remember that the principle of correspondence is not merely theoretical, it is eminently practical. By recognizing the patterns that connect different aspects of reality, you gain the ability to work more effectively with the universal laws. You begin to see your life not as a series of disconnected events, but as an integrated expression of consistent principles. As you deepen your understanding of correspondence, you develop what might be called metaphysical pattern recognition, the ability to perceive the underlying unity within apparent diversity. This perception reveals a universe that is not chaotic or arbitrary, but exquisitely ordered and intelligently designed. In such a universe, nothing is truly foreign or incomprehensible. The unknown simply awaits illumination through correspondence with the known. The principle of correspondence stands as a testament to the fundamental coherence of existence. In a reality where, as above, so below consistently applies, you are never truly lost or disconnected. You are always, inescapably, part of the great pattern, a living embodiment of the cosmic blueprint. Chapter 3. Nothing rests, everything vibrates, delving into the principle of vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. With these words, the Kybalion introduces us to the third great Hermetic principle, the principle of vibration. Building upon the foundations established by the principles of mentalism and correspondence, this principle reveals the dynamic, energetic nature of all existence. The principle of vibration states that motion is present in everything in the universe, that nothing is at rest, and that everything moves, vibrates, and circulates. From the smallest subatomic particle to the largest galactic cluster, from the densest physical matter to the most refined spiritual essence, everything exists in a state of vibration. What appears as solid, static, or inert to our limited senses is, in reality, in constant motion at varying rates of vibration. Modern science has thoroughly validated this ancient understanding. Physics has demonstrated that all matter consists of atoms in constant vibratory motion. Even in substances that appear completely solid, the atoms and molecules are vibrating, rotating, and moving in relation to each other. At temperatures approaching absolute zero, where one might expect motion to cease entirely, quantum physics reveals that a residual vibration, the zero-point energy, remains. Truly, nothing in the physical universe is ever completely at rest. Yet the principle of vibration extends far beyond the physical realm. The Hermeticists understood that thoughts, emotions, desires, and will, all states of consciousness, are also forms of vibration, differing from physical vibrations only in frequency and mode of expression. Your thoughts are not abstract or immaterial in the absolute sense. They are energy patterns vibrating at frequencies beyond the detection of physical instruments, but nonetheless real and substantial on their own plane. This understanding reveals the mechanism by which the principle of mentalism operates. If the universe is mental in nature, and all mental states are vibratory, then the entire universe exists as an infinitely complex pattern of vibration within the mind of the all. Creation, from this perspective, is not a single event, but an ongoing process of vibratory expression. The practical implications of this principle are profound and far-reaching. If everything is vibration, then the apparent differences between things, between one physical object and another, between matter and energy, between different emotional states, or between physical and mental planes, are differences not of kind, but of degree. They are distinctions of vibratory rate and pattern rather than fundamental separations. This insight is particularly powerful when applied to human consciousness and experience. Your thoughts and emotions exist as vibratory patterns. When you maintain a thought or feeling over time, you strengthen its vibration. When you consistently focus on particular mental states, you establish vibratory patterns that tend to persist and attract corresponding experiences. This is the vibratory mechanism behind what many traditions call the law of attraction, like attracts like, because similar vibrations naturally resonate with and reinforce each other. Consider how this principle operates in your emotional life. Each emotional state, joy, peace, frustration, anxiety, has its characteristic vibration. When you experience an emotion strongly or repeatedly, you establish a vibratory pattern that makes it easier to re-experience that same emotion and harder to access emotions of a significantly different vibration. This explains why emotional states tend to be self-perpetuating and why shifting from one emotional extreme to another can be challenging without intermediate steps. The principle of vibration also illuminates the nature of personal transformation. Lasting change requires altering your habitual vibratory patterns. This is rarely accomplished through a single thought or decision, but rather through consistent practice that gradually shifts your dominant frequency. Just as a musician must practice regularly to master an instrument, you must practice desired mental and emotional states to change your vibratory signature. One of the most powerful applications of this principle is the practice of conscious vibration management. By becoming aware of your current vibratory state and deliberately choosing to shift toward higher, more refined vibrations, you can transform your experience from within. This is not merely positive thinking, but a practical application of universal law. How might you work more consciously with the principle of vibration? Begin by developing greater awareness of the vibratory nature of your thoughts and feelings. Notice how certain mental states feel heavy or dense, while others feel light or expansive. Pay attention to how your vibratory state affects your perception, your energy level, and the quality of your interactions. You can then practice deliberately elevating your vibration through various means. Meditation, prayer, inspiring music, time in nature, creative expression, and service to others are all time-tested methods for raising your vibratory frequency. Conversely, be mindful of influences that lower your vibration, such as excessive exposure to negativity, fear-based media, or toxic relationships. Another powerful application involves using higher vibrations to transmute lower ones. Rather than fighting against unwanted mental or emotional states, which often strengthens them through the attention given, you can introduce a higher vibration that naturally transforms the lower one. Just as adding light to a room automatically dispels darkness, introducing love, gratitude, or joy into your consciousness naturally transmutes fear, resentment, or despair. The principle of vibration also explains the efficacy of many healing modalities. Sound healing, color therapy, flower essences, and various energy healing techniques all work with the understanding that introducing specific vibratory patterns can restore harmony to dissonant energetic systems. Your physical body, being vibratory in nature, responds to vibrational interventions that support its natural harmonious functioning. Understanding vibration further reveals why environment matters so profoundly. The people, places, sounds, colors, and objects that surround you all emit vibrations that interact with your own. By consciously creating environments that support elevated vibrations, you make your own vibratory elevation easier and more sustainable. Perhaps, most importantly, the principle of vibration reminds us that stagnation is impossible in a universe where everything is in motion. Change is not merely possible, it is inevitable. The question is not whether your vibratory state will change, but whether that change will be conscious and directed, or unconscious and random. By understanding and working with this principle, you claim your power as a conscious conductor of your own energetic symphony. As you integrate this understanding into your daily awareness, you begin to experience yourself not as a solid, fixed entity, but as a dynamic vibratory system in constant relationship with the larger vibratory systems around you. This perception dissolves the illusion of separation and reveals your fundamental connectedness with all of existence. a unity not just of substance, but of living, vibrating energy. The principle of vibration stands as both a scientific fact and a spiritual revelation. In a universe where nothing rests and everything vibrates, you are never truly stuck or limited. You are, by your very nature, a being of vibration, capable of tuning yourself to increasingly harmonious and elevated frequencies, and thereby transforming your entire experience of reality. Chapter 4. Everything is dual. Explaining the principle of polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. This comprehensive statement from the Kybalion introduces us to the fourth Hermetic principle, the principle of polarity, which reveals the complementary nature of apparent opposites and provides a key to transcending the limitations of dualistic thinking. The principle of polarity asserts that everything in existence has two poles or aspects that appear to be contradictory, yet are actually complementary expressions of the same phenomenon. What we perceive as opposites, hot and cold, light and dark, love and hate, good and evil, positive and negative, are not fundamentally different things, but rather varying degrees of the same thing, differing only in rate of vibration and position on a continuous spectrum. To understand this principle, consider temperature. Hot and cold appear to be opposites, yet they are merely different degrees of the same phenomenon, thermal energy. There is no absolute point where hot definitively begins and cold definitively ends. They blend into each other along a continuous scale. The same applies to light and dark, which are degrees of the presence or absence of light energy, not separate forces battling each other. This understanding extends beyond physical phenomena to mental and emotional states. Love and hate are not entirely separate emotions, but poles of the same emotional energy. This explains why intense love can sometimes transform into intense dislike, or why we can simultaneously love and hate aspects of the same person or situation. The emotions we experience exist on continuums rather than as isolated, unrelated states. The principle of polarity reveals why the ancient wisdom traditions consistently emphasize the middle path or the balance point between extremes. When we recognize that opposites are connected rather than fundamentally separate, we can find the point of harmony that incorporates the wisdom of both poles while avoiding the limitations of either extreme. This principle has profound implications for how we approach the challenges and contradictions in our lives. When faced with seemingly opposing choices or perspectives, the principle of polarity invites us to look beyond the apparent contradiction to find the underlying unity. Rather than being trapped in either-or thinking, we can embrace both and awareness that recognizes the partial truth in opposing viewpoints. Consider how this applies to personal growth. Many people struggle with perceiving themselves as either good or bad, successful or failing, spiritual or worldly. The principle of polarity reveals that these are not absolute categories but points on continuums. You are not either worthy or unworthy. These are poles of the same spectrum of self-valuation. You are not either completely spiritual or completely material. These are aspects of your unified being that exist in dynamic relationship. One of the most powerful applications of this principle is the practice of mental transmutation, the art of consciously shifting from one mental pole to its opposite. If you find yourself experiencing a negative emotional state, the principle of polarity reveals that the positive counterpart of that emotion exists on the same spectrum. Rather than fighting against the negative state, which often strengthens it through opposition, you can intentionally begin moving along the spectrum toward the positive pole. For example, if you are experiencing fear, you can recognize that courage is its polar opposite on the same continuum. By gradually shifting your mental state toward courage, perhaps by focusing on times when you have been courageous, or by taking small courageous actions, you transmute the fear into its opposite. This is not denial or suppression, but conscious transformation based on understanding the polar nature of emotional states. The principle of polarity also illuminates the paradoxical nature of spiritual truth. Throughout history, spiritual teachings have employed paradox and apparent contradiction to point toward truths that transcend dualistic thinking. Statements like, "To find yourself, you must lose yourself," or "The way up is the way down," are not logical contradictions, but expressions of the polar nature of reality. They invite us to move beyond the limitations of either-or thinking into a more encompassing awareness. How might you work more consciously with the principle of polarity in your daily life? Begin by identifying areas where you tend toward black and white thinking, or where you feel trapped between seemingly irreconcilable opposites. Recognize that these apparent contradictions likely represent poles of the same phenomenon. Look for the spectrum that connects them and explore the possibility of finding balance points that incorporate the wisdom of both extremes. Practice mental transmutation when you find yourself fixated on a negative pole. Remember that its positive counterpart exists on the same spectrum and is therefore always accessible. Begin the gradual process of shifting your consciousness along that spectrum, knowing that even small movements in the positive direction create momentum for further transformation. You can also apply this principle to interpersonal conflicts and societal polarization. When people are entrenched in opposing positions, the principle of polarity suggests that each position likely contains partial truths. By recognizing the underlying spectrum that connects seemingly opposed viewpoints, you can help identify common ground and more integrative solutions. The principle of polarity further reveals why judgment of self or others is often misguided. When we condemn a quality in ourselves or someone else, we are typically focusing on one pole while ignoring its relationship to its opposite. The quality we judge as bad may be an excessive or imbalanced expression of something that, in its balanced form, is necessary and beneficial. For instance, stubbornness is the imbalanced expression of determination. Recklessness is the imbalanced expression of courage. Perhaps most profoundly, the principle of polarity points toward the possibility of transcending duality altogether. If opposites are ultimately connected aspects of the same thing, then there must exist a level of consciousness that encompasses and reconciles all apparent contradictions. Many spiritual traditions identify this as the non-dual awareness or unity consciousness that lies beyond the pairs of opposites. As you deepen your understanding of this principle, you begin to experience reality not as a collection of separate opposing forces, but as a unified field of complementary energies in dynamic relationship. This perception dissolves rigid boundaries and reveals the fundamental interconnectedness of all aspects of existence. The principle of polarity stands as both a practical tool for navigating life's challenges and a gateway to higher consciousness. In a reality where everything is dual yet ultimately unified, you are never truly trapped in any extreme. You always have the freedom to move along the spectrum toward greater balance, harmony, and wholeness, and ultimately toward the transcendent awareness that embraces all poles in perfect unity. Chapter 5. The Pendulum Swing. Understanding the principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. This eloquent statement from the Kybalion introduces us to the fifth Hermetic principle, the principle of rhythm, which reveals the cyclical, oscillating nature of all phenomena in the universe. The principle of rhythm states that in everything there is manifested a measured motion, a to and fro movement, a flow and inflow, a swing backward and forward, a pendulum-like movement. This rhythmic pattern occurs between the two poles established by the principle of polarity. Nothing remains static. Everything moves through cycles of increase and decrease, advance and retreat, expression and recession. We observe this principle clearly in the natural world, the cycles of day and night, the waxing and waning of the moon, the changing of the seasons, the ebb and flow of tides, the inhalation and exhalation of breath. These are not random fluctuations, but expressions of the underlying rhythmic pattern that governs all existence. Even the great cosmic cycles described by various traditions, from the Hindu concept of yugas to the Mayan calendar system, reflect this same principle operating on a grand scale. The principle of rhythm extends beyond physical phenomena to encompass mental, emotional, and spiritual states. Your energy levels, emotional moods, creative inspiration, and spiritual awareness all move through natural cycles of high and low, active and receptive, expansion and contraction. These rhythms are not flaws or inconsistencies, but essential aspects of the universal pattern. Understanding this principle liberates you from the common misconception that consistency means constancy, that a balanced life should maintain the same state indefinitely. True balance is not static, but dynamic, honoring the natural rhythms of activity and rest, expression and reflection, gathering and releasing. Just as a pendulum achieves equilibrium through its swing, rather than by remaining fixed at center, you achieve balance by moving harmoniously with life's natural rhythms, rather than resisting them. The principle of rhythm also explains why all conditions, favorable or unfavorable, are temporary. When you're experiencing a high point in any area of life, the principle reveals that a corresponding low will eventually follow. Conversely, when you are in a low period, you can take comfort in knowing that an upswing is inevitable. This understanding fosters both humility in times of success and hope in times of difficulty. However, the Hermetic masters taught that while rhythm cannot be cancelled or avoided entirely, its effects can be mitigated through the application of will and consciousness. This is achieved through what the Kybalion calls the law of neutralization, mentally rising above the oscillations of the pendulum by establishing yourself at higher levels of consciousness. To understand this process, imagine a pendulum swinging along the horizontal plane. If you identify completely with the horizontal movement, you will be carried from one extreme to another. But if you can shift your awareness upward to a higher position, you can observe the pendulum's swing without being caught in its extremes. This is not denial or avoidance, but transcendence through higher awareness. How might you apply this principle in your daily life? Begin by recognizing the natural rhythms operating in different areas of your experience. Notice the cycles in your energy, creativity, relationships, and spiritual practice. Rather than fighting against these rhythms or judging yourself when you're in a low phase, learn to work with them intelligently. During high energy, expansive phases, focus on creation, expression, and active engagement with the world. Use these periods for initiating projects, making connections, and pushing boundaries. During low energy, contractive phases, emphasize reflection, integration, and inner work. Use these periods for assimilating experiences, refining ideas, and replenishing your resources. The principle of rhythm also invites you to develop greater equanimity toward life's fluctuations. When experiencing success or joy, maintain an awareness that this state, while to be fully enjoyed, is not permanent. This awareness prevents the attachment that leads to suffering when conditions inevitably change. Similarly, when facing challenges or distress, remember that this state too shall pass, which fosters resilience and prevents despair. For more advanced application, practice the law of neutralization. When you notice yourself being pulled toward an extreme, whether of emotion, thought, or action, consciously shift your awareness to a higher perspective. Rather than identifying with the swinging pendulum of experience, identify with the consciousness that observes the swing. This doesn't mean detaching from life, but rather engaging with it from a more centered, balanced position. The principle of rhythm further reveals why timing is so crucial in all endeavors. Working with natural rhythms rather than against them conserves energy and increases effectiveness. There are times when effort produces maximum results, and times when the same effort yields minimal returns. By attuning yourself to the rhythms operating in any situation, you can act at the optimal moment rather than fighting against the prevailing tide. This principle also illuminates the cyclical nature of collective human experience. Societies move through rhythmic patterns of expansion and contraction, conservation and innovation, materialistic and spiritual emphasis. By recognizing these larger cycles, you can better understand current cultural conditions and anticipate future trends, allowing you to position yourself advantageously within the greater rhythm. Perhaps most profoundly, the principle of rhythm points toward the possibility of harmonizing your personal rhythms with universal rhythms. Many spiritual traditions emphasize practices that align individual consciousness with cosmic cycles, from observing holy days that correspond to solar and lunar events, to timing prayers and meditations to specific hours of the day. These practices are not merely symbolic, but practical methods for synchronizing personal energy with universal energy. As you deepen your understanding of this principle, you begin to experience life not as a linear progression toward fixed goals, but as a rhythmic dance of complementary energies. You learn to move with these energies rather than against them, finding the natural flow that makes all action more effective and all experience more harmonious. The principle of rhythm stands as both a description of universal patterning and a guide to conscious living. In a reality where everything moves in measured cycles, you are never permanently trapped in any condition. By understanding and working with life's natural rhythms, you transform what might otherwise be experienced as chaotic ups and downs into a graceful, purposeful dance with the cosmic order. Chapter 6. Every cause has its effect. Exploring the principle of cause and effect. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. With these words, the Kybalion introduces the sixth Hermetic principle, the principle of cause and effect, which reveals the ordered, lawful nature of all phenomena and the chain of causation that connects all events in the universe. The principle of cause and effect states that nothing happens by chance or outside the universal law. Every action generates a reaction. Every effect can be traced to a cause. Every cause must produce an effect. What appears as coincidence or chance is merely the operation of causative factors, not recognized or understood by the observer. In a universe governed by law rather than chaos, true randomness is an impossibility. This principle is perhaps the most widely acknowledged of the 7 Hermetic laws, forming the foundation of scientific inquiry and rational thought. From Newton's laws of motion to the principle of conservation of energy, modern science has repeatedly confirmed that the physical universe operates according to consistent cause-effect relationships. Every action produces an equal and opposite reaction. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed, only transformed from one form to another. Yet the Hermetic understanding extends beyond physical causation to encompass mental, emotional, and spiritual planes as well. Your thoughts, feelings, words, and intentions are causal forces that generate corresponding effects, both within your own being and in the world around you. The ancient wisdom that, as you sow, so shall you reap, is not merely moral guidance, but a precise description of how universal law operates across all planes of existence. The principle of cause and effect reveals why personal responsibility is not a social convention, but a metaphysical reality. Every thought you entertain, every emotion you harbor, every word you speak, and every action you take sets in motion chains of causation that inevitably return to affect your own experience. This is not punishment or reward in the conventional sense, but the impersonal operation of universal law. This understanding transforms how you perceive the circumstances of your life. What you experience today is the effect of causes set in motion in the past, whether in this lifetime or beyond, whether consciously or unconsciously. Similarly, the causes you set in motion today will inevitably manifest as effects in your future experience. This recognition shifts you from a victim mentality that blames external factors for your conditions to a creator mentality that acknowledges your role in shaping your reality. The Hermetic masters taught that while no one can entirely escape the principle of cause and effect, one can learn to work with it consciously rather than being its unconscious instrument. By understanding the planes of causation and the laws that govern them, you can become a deliberate cause rather than a passive effect. This is the essence of what many traditions call mastery, not exemption from universal law, but skilled application of it. One of the most important aspects of this principle is the understanding that causation operates on multiple planes simultaneously. A single event may have physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual causes, all contributing to its manifestation. This multidimensional causation explains why purely physical solutions often fail to resolve problems with deeper roots, and why spiritual practices can sometimes affect physical conditions that seem unrelated. How might you apply this principle more consciously in your daily life? Begin by developing greater awareness of the causes you are setting in motion. Before speaking or acting, consider the potential effects that might result. Rather than reacting automatically to situations, pause to choose responses that will generate the effects you desire. Remember that even your thoughts and feelings are causes that will produce corresponding effects. Practice tracing the effects in your life back to their causal factors. When facing challenges or enjoying successes, look beyond immediate circumstances to identify the chains of causation that led to these conditions. This retrospective analysis helps you recognize patterns of cause and effect that might otherwise remain invisible, allowing you to make more conscious choices in the present. The principle of cause and effect also illuminates the nature of personal transformation. Lasting change requires altering the causal factors that generate your habitual patterns. Trying to change effects without addressing their causes is like cutting the visible portion of a weed while leaving the roots intact. The unwanted growth will inevitably return. True transformation involves identifying and changing the root causes of unwanted conditions, whether those causes are beliefs, emotional patterns, or habitual behaviors. This principle further reveals why patience is essential in all creative and transformative work. There is often a time lag between the initiation of a cause and the manifestation of its effect. Just as a farmer must wait for seeds to germinate and grow before harvesting, you must allow time for the causes you set in motion to develop into manifest effects. Impatience that abandons efforts before they have time to bear fruit interrupts the natural process of manifestation. The principle of cause and effect also explains the mechanics behind what many traditions call karma, the law of action and consequence that governs the evolution of consciousness. Karma is not punishment or reward, but education through experience. By experiencing the effects of various causes, consciousness learns the nature of universal law and gradually aligns itself with higher principles. This learning process continues across multiple lifetimes, with each soul experiencing the consequences of its choices until it masters the lessons they contain. Understanding this principle helps resolve the apparent contradiction between determinism and free will. Your current conditions are indeed determined by past causes, many of which were set in motion before you developed conscious awareness. Yet within those conditions, you retain the freedom to set new causes in motion that will shape your future experience. You are simultaneously living the effects of your past choices and creating the causes of your future experiences. Perhaps most importantly, the principle of cause and effect reveals why integrity, alignment between thought, word, and deed, is so essential for harmonious living. When your actions contradict your words, or your words contradict your thoughts, you set conflicting causes in motion that generate dissonant effects. Integrity creates coherent causation, which manifests as harmonious effects across all areas of life. As you deepen your understanding of this principle, you begin to perceive the intricate web of causation that connects all events and circumstances. You recognize that nothing happens in isolation and that every occurrence, however seemingly insignificant, contributes to the unfolding pattern of the whole. This perception fosters both humility regarding your own importance and reverence for the power of your choices. The principle of cause and effect stands as both a description of universal functioning and a guide to conscious living. In a reality where every cause has its effect and every effect has its cause, you are never powerless. By understanding and working with this principle, you transform yourself from a passive recipient of circumstances to an active participant in creation, a conscious cause generating the effects you desire to experience. Chapter 7. Gender is in everything. Understanding the principle of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. With this statement, the Kybalion introduces the seventh and final Hermetic principle, the principle of gender, which reveals the complementary creative energies that exist within all things and the process through which these energies interact to generate new manifestations. The principle of gender states that everything contains both masculine and feminine qualities, not in the limited biological sense, but as universal creative principles that operate throughout all planes of existence. These principles are sometimes called the active and receptive, projective and receptive, or yang and yin energies. They represent complementary forces that, working together, enable the processes of creation, generation, and regeneration. It is crucial to understand that the Hermetic concept of gender transcends physical sex or social gender roles. These principles exist within each person, regardless of biological sex or gender identity, and within each entity or force in the universe. The sun exhibits predominantly masculine energy, projective, radiating outward, while the moon exhibits predominantly feminine energy, receptive, reflecting. Yet both contain aspects of the opposite principle as well. Nothing is purely one or the other. On the physical plane, we observe this principle in the biological reproduction of plants and animals, where masculine and feminine elements combine to create new life. But the principle of gender extends far beyond physical reproduction to encompass all creative processes. In art, the inspiration, feminine, receptive, must be combined with technique and execution, masculine, projective, to produce a finished work. In business, vision and intuition, feminine, must be paired with action and implementation, masculine, for success. Within the human psyche, the principle of gender manifests as the interplay between intuition and reason, receptivity and assertiveness, being and doing. A balanced individual cultivates both sets of qualities, knowing when to receive and when to project, when to be receptive to new information, and when to act decisively on what is known. This principle further reveals why creation is never a solitary act, but always involves the interaction of complementary forces. Even in apparently individual creation, such as an artist working alone, there is still an interplay between receptive inspiration and projective execution, between the unconscious mind that receives ideas and the conscious mind that shapes them into form. One of the most profound aspects of this principle is its revelation of the process of mental creation. The Hermetic tradition teaches that all manifestation begins in the mental realm, where masculine and feminine energies interact to conceive and gestate new realities before they appear in the physical world. Your conscious mind, predominantly masculine in function, impregnates your subconscious mind, predominantly feminine in function, with ideas and intentions. The subconscious then nurtures and develops these seeds, eventually bringing them forth as manifest conditions, experiences, or creations. Understanding this process is essential for effective manifestation. Many people attempt to create desired outcomes through conscious will alone, not realizing that this represents only half of the creative equation. True creation requires both the masculine element of clear intention and directed thought, and the feminine element of receptivity, nurturing, and gestation. Neglecting either aspect disrupts the natural creative process. How might you apply this principle more consciously in your daily life? Begin by recognizing and honoring both masculine and feminine energies within yourself, regardless of your biological sex or gender identity. Develop your capacity to both act decisively and receive openly, to both speak with authority and listen with sensitivity, to both analyze logically and perceive intuitively. Practice conscious creation by working with the natural interaction of masculine and feminine principles. Set clear intentions, masculine, and then create receptive space, feminine, for those intentions to develop. Alternate periods of directed action with periods of receptive awareness. Remember that creation is not forced, but allowed. A dance of complementary energies rather than an exercise of unilateral will. The principle of gender also illuminates the nature of relationships. Every relationship, whether romantic, familial, professional, or social, involves an exchange of masculine and feminine energies between the participants. These energies may shift and alternate regardless of the biological sexes involved. Harmonious relationships maintain a dynamic balance of these complementary forces, with each party both giving and receiving, both leading and following as appropriate to the situation. This principle further reveals why balance is essential in all areas of life. An excess of masculine energy without sufficient feminine complement leads to forceful action without wisdom, assertion without receptivity, doing without being. Conversely, an excess of feminine energy without sufficient masculine complement leads to inspiration without implementation, receptivity without boundaries, being without doing. True power comes from the balanced expression of both principles. The principle of gender also explains the process of spiritual development. Many traditions describe spiritual growth as the union of complementary forces within the individual, whether called spirit and matter, heaven and earth, or Shiva and Shakti. This inner sacred marriage represents the harmonization of masculine and feminine principles that unlocks higher consciousness and creative power. Understanding this principle helps resolve the apparent competition between masculine and feminine approaches in various fields. In science, technology, business, education, governance, and spirituality, the most effective approaches integrate the strengths of both principles rather than privileging one over the other. The analytical rigor of masculine energy and the holistic awareness of feminine energy are not opponents, but partners in the creation of comprehensive understanding. Perhaps most profoundly, the principle of gender points toward the fundamental unity that underlies apparent duality. If everything contains both masculine and feminine principles, then these are not separate, opposing forces, but complementary expressions of a single creative energy. Their apparent separation serves the purpose of creation, but their essential nature is unified. As you deepen your understanding of this principle, you begin to perceive the dance of masculine and feminine energies in all phenomena, from the most mundane physical processes to the most elevated spiritual experiences. You recognize that creation is never the result of a single force, but always the product of complementary energies in dynamic relationship. The principle of gender stands as both a description of universal creative process and a guide to balanced living. In a reality where gender manifests on all planes, you are never limited to a single mode of expression or creation. By understanding and working with both masculine and feminine principles, you access the full spectrum of your creative power and participate more consciously in the generative processes of the universe. Conclusion: living in harmony with universal law. We have journeyed together through the 7 Hermetic principles that form the cosmic blueprint of reality: mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. These principles are not abstract theories or philosophical curiosities, but the very operating system of existence, the fundamental laws that govern every aspect of the universe, from the formation of galaxies to the unfolding of your individual life. Understanding these principles transforms your relationship with reality in profound and practical ways. You now recognize that the universe is not a random collection of disconnected events, but an intelligently ordered system operating according to consistent laws. What once may have seemed chaotic or arbitrary now reveals itself as part of a greater pattern, a cosmic design that you can comprehend and consciously align with. The 7 principles work together as an integrated system, each one complementing and expanding upon the others. The principle of mentalism establishes that reality is fundamentally mental in nature. The principle of correspondence reveals the structured relationships between different planes of existence. The principle of vibration explains the dynamic, energetic nature of all phenomena. The principle of polarity illuminates the complementary nature of apparent opposites. The principle of rhythm describes the cyclical patterns of movement between poles. The principle of cause and effect reveals the lawful chain of causation connecting all events. And the principle of gender explains the complementary creative energies that generate new manifestations. Together, These principles provide a comprehensive framework for understanding how reality operates and how you can work more consciously within it. They reveal that you are not a helpless spectator in a predetermined universe, but an active participant in an intelligently designed system. A system that responds to your conscious engagement with it. So how do you begin consciously aligning with these universal laws in your daily life? The process starts with awareness, simply recognizing when and how these principles are operating in your experience. Notice the mental nature of your reality, the correspondences between different aspects of your life, the vibratory quality of your thoughts and emotions, the polar relationships between opposing states, the rhythmic cycles of your experience, the chains of cause and effect, and the interplay of masculine and feminine energies in your creative process. This awareness alone will begin to shift your relationship with reality. You'll find yourself less reactive to circumstances, more cognizant of your creative power, and more attuned to the natural flows and patterns of life. But awareness is just the beginning. True mastery comes through consistent, intentional application of these principles in every area of your existence. Start with your inner world, your thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and intentions. Recognize that these are not merely subjective experiences, but causal forces that generate corresponding effects. Choose them consciously rather than by default. Work with the principle of mentalism by cultivating thoughts that align with your desired reality. Apply the principle of vibration by maintaining elevated emotional states. Use the principle of polarity to transmute negative mental conditions into positive ones. Honor the principle of rhythm by allowing natural cycles of activity and rest. Implement the principle of cause and effect by setting in motion causes that will generate desired effects. Engage the principle of gender by balancing the masculine and feminine aspects of your creative process. Then extend this conscious alignment to your outer world, your words, actions, relationships, and creative expressions. Speak and act in ways that reflect your understanding of universal law. Build relationships that honor the complementary nature of different energies. Create in harmony with natural processes rather than in opposition to them. Make choices that acknowledge the interconnectedness of all things and the lawful unfolding of all events. Remember that aligning with universal law is not about forcing reality to conform to your personal desires. It's about recognizing the greater patterns at work and positioning yourself advantageously within them, like a sailor who doesn't command the wind but adjusts the sails to harness its power. True mastery comes not from dominating natural forces, but from understanding them so thoroughly that you can work with them rather than against them. This alignment is not achieved overnight, but developed through consistent practice and deepening understanding. There will be moments of apparent setback or confusion as you learn to navigate by these principles. This is natural and expected, part of the rhythmic process of growth. What matters is not perfection, but persistence, the willingness to keep returning to these truths and applying them with increasing skill and awareness. As you continue this journey of conscious alignment, you'll discover that the universal laws are not constraints limiting your freedom, but guidelines empowering your creative expression. Just as understanding the laws of aerodynamics doesn't restrict flight but makes it possible, understanding the cosmic blueprint doesn't limit your potential but reveals how to fulfill it. You'll also find that working with these principles naturally fosters spiritual development. The more consciously you align with universal law, the more you transcend the limitations of ego-centered awareness and access expanded states of consciousness. This is not mystical coincidence, but the natural result of harmonizing your individual mind with the greater patterns of the universal mind. Perhaps most importantly, you'll experience a profound shift in how you relate to challenges and opportunities alike. Challenges become growth experiences rather than obstacles, opportunities to deepen your understanding and refine your alignment. Opportunities become conscious co-creations rather than lucky breaks, natural manifestations of your harmonious relationship with universal principles. The knowledge you now possess is both a privilege and a responsibility. Throughout history, these principles have been carefully guarded, shared only with those prepared to use them wisely. Having received this wisdom, you are called to apply it not just for personal benefit, but for the greater good, to become a conscious agent of evolution, contributing to the harmonious development of all life. As you move forward from these pages into the laboratory of daily experience, carry with you the awareness that you are never separate from the cosmic blueprint. You are not merely subject to these laws, but an expression of them, a unique embodiment of the same intelligence that orchestrates the dance of galaxies and the unfolding of flowers. Your true power lies not in exemption from universal law, but in conscious participation with it. The universe is not happening to you, it is happening through you and as you. By understanding and aligning with its fundamental principles, you step into your rightful role as a conscious creator, not the sole author of reality, but a vital collaborator in its ongoing unfoldment. This is your birthright and your destiny, to live in harmony with the cosmic blueprint, contributing your unique note to the grand symphony of existence. Have you begun to notice how these universal laws are already operating in your life? Perhaps without your conscious awareness until now. Think about a recent challenge you faced. Can you identify which of these 7 principles was at work, silently guiding the situation toward its inevitable conclusion? I invite you to share in the comments which of these laws resonated most deeply with you, or perhaps which one you're struggling to reconcile with your current understanding of reality. As you integrate this knowledge into your daily experience, start by focusing on just one principle this week. Perhaps choose the principle of mentalism and begin observing how your thoughts create your experience, or the principle of vibration, by consciously elevating your emotional state several times throughout the day. Remember, understanding these laws intellectually is only the first step. Their true power emerges when you begin consciously working with them, rather than unconsciously being worked upon by them. If you found value in today's exploration of universal laws, please support the channel by hitting the like button and subscribing for more metaphysical wisdom. Next Monday, we'll be delving into the power of mind, where we'll explore practical techniques for harnessing your mental faculties to consciously create your desired reality. Until then, remember that you're not just living in the universe, you are an active participant in its intelligent design.